The morning sun cast long shadows across Terminal 3 of Mumbai's Chhatrapati Shivaji International Airport as thousands of passengers hurried through the busy corridors. Among them walked a woman in her early 30s, dressed in simple jeans and a white cotton shirt, pulling a small black suitcase behind her. Her name was Captain Sarah Mitchell, though nobody around her knew that. To everyone else, she was just another tourist, ending her vacation in India. Sarah had deliberately chosen casual clothes for her journey home to London. After 2 weeks of exploring the vibrant streets of Mumbai, the ancient temples of Rajasthan, and the peaceful backwaters of Kerala, she wanted to blend in with the other travelers. Her airline uniform was packed away in her suitcase, and her pilot's license was tucked safely in her wallet, unused for these precious days of freedom. She had worked for British Airways for 8 years, flying Boeing 777 seconds across international routes. It was her dream job, but the constant pressure and responsibility meant she rarely took real vacations. This trip to India was her first proper break in 2 years. She had turned off her work phone, avoided aviation news, and focused entirely on experiencing a new culture. As Sarah approached her gate for Flight AI 482 to London Heathrow, she noticed the usual chaos of international travel. Families struggled with oversized luggage. Business travelers typed frantically on their laptops, and children ran around while their parents tried to keep them entertained during the long wait. The aircraft sitting at Gate 23 was an Airbus, a 330, operated by Air India. Sarah's trained eye automatically assessed the plane as she walked past the large windows. She noted the position of the engines, the condition of the landing gear, and the general maintenance of the exterior. It was a habit she couldn't turn off, even on vacation. Flight AI 482 was scheduled to depart at 2:15 p.m. local time. Sarah found a seat near the gate and pulled out a book she had bought at a local market in Delhi. It was a collection of Indian short stories, and she was eager to continue reading during the 8-hour flight to London. Around her, she could hear conversations in dozens of languages. A group of British tourists discussed their experiences visiting the Taj Mahal. An Indian family spoke rapidly in Hindi as they organized their documents for immigration. German backpackers compared photos on their phones, showing off the incredible shots they had captured during their journey. Sarah smiled as she listened to their excitement. She remembered her own first international trip as a young woman, before she became a pilot. The wonder of experiencing new places, meeting different people, and tasting unfamiliar foods never got old. Even now, despite traveling constantly for work, she still felt that spark of adventure when visiting somewhere new. At 1:45 p.m., the gate agent announced that boarding would begin shortly. Sarah gathered her belongings and joined the line forming near the departure gate. She was traveling in economy class, having booked the trip with her own money rather than using her airline benefits. Sometimes it was nice to be just a regular passenger. As she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, Sarah noticed the woman's tired expression. Working in aviation meant long hours and dealing with stressed passengers all day. Sarah gave her a warm smile and said thank you in Hindi, a phrase she had learned during her trip. The agent's face brightened, and she smiled back genuinely. Sarah made her way down the jet bridge, enjoying the familiar smell of aircraft fuel and the sound of engines warming up on the tarmac. Even on vacation, these sensations felt like coming home. She found her seat, 24C, a middle seat in the economy section. The passenger in the window seat was already settled in, an elderly Indian man reading a newspaper. The aisle seat remained empty for now. She stowed her small backpack in the overhead compartment and settled into her seat. The aircraft was filling up quickly, and she could see it would be nearly full. Sarah estimated around 320 passengers based on the size of the A330 and the configuration she could observe. As more passengers boarded, Sarah watched the flight attendants go through their pre-flight preparations. She recognized the professional efficiency in their movements, the way they checked safety equipment and ensured everything was properly secured. These were experienced crew members who took their responsibilities seriously. The elderly man next to her noticed her observing the crew and struck up a conversation. His name was Mr. Sharma, and he was returning home to London after visiting his family in Mumbai. He had worked as an engineer for 40 years before retiring, and he was curious about Sarah's profession. Sarah hesitated for a moment. She had enjoyed the anonymity of being just another tourist during her vacation. But Mr. Sharma seemed genuinely interested, so she decided to be honest without making a big deal of it. "I work in aviation," she said simply. "I'm a pilot, actually." Mr. Sharma's eyes widened with interest. "Really? How fascinating. I've always wondered what it's like to fly these big aircraft. Do you fly this route often?" Sarah shook her head. "No. This is actually my first time visiting India. I've been on vacation for the past 2 weeks. It's been incredible." "No." They continued chatting as the aircraft finished boarding. Sarah learned that Mr. Sharma had 3 grandchildren in London, and that he tried to visit Mumbai twice a year to see his extended family. He told her about the changes he had witnessed in the city over the decades, how it had grown and modernized while still maintaining its unique character. At exactly 2:15 p.m., the aircraft doors were closed, and the flight attendants began their safety demonstration. Sarah watched with professional interest, noting how they handled the routine. Everything appeared normal and well executed. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming passengers aboard and announcing the flight time to London. His English was clear and confident, with just a slight Indian accent. Sarah found herself analyzing his tone and delivery out of habit, the way pilots often did when listening to their colleagues. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate and began taxiing toward the runway, Sarah felt the familiar excitement of takeoff. No matter how many times she had done this professionally, there was still something magical about the moment when tons of metal lifted off the ground and soared into the sky. The takeoff was smooth and professional. Sarah felt the engines spool up to full power, the slight rumble through the aircraft structure, and then the gentle lift as they left the ground behind. Through the small window, she watched Mumbai shrink below them as they climbed into the afternoon sky. For the first hour of the flight, everything proceeded normally. The flight attendants served drinks and snacks, passengers settled in for the long journey, and the aircraft maintained its steady climb to cruising altitude. Sarah continued reading her book and chatting occasionally with Mr. Sharma, who proved to be an excellent traveling companion. But as they reached 35,000 feet over the Arabian Sea, something changed. Sarah noticed it first as a subtle shift in the engine sound, a slight variation that most passengers wouldn't detect. Her trained ear immediately picked up the difference, and she found herself listening more carefully. Then she felt it through the aircraft structure, a barely perceptible vibration that shouldn't have been there. Sarah put down her book and focused entirely on what she was sensing. The vibration was coming from the left side of the aircraft, most likely from the port engine. Mr. Sharma noticed her sudden change in attention. "Is everything all right?" he asked quietly. Sarah didn't want to alarm him unnecessarily, but her pilot instincts were now fully engaged. "Probably nothing," she said. "But I'm just listening to the engines." Over the next few minutes, the vibration became more pronounced. Sarah could feel it in her feet and through the seat. This was definitely not normal. She had experienced similar situations during her training and once in actual flight, and she knew this could indicate a serious engine problem. The aircraft was still flying normally, maintaining altitude and speed. But Sarah's professional training told her that something was developing. Engine problems could escalate quickly, especially at high altitude over water. She was facing a dilemma. She was just a passenger on this flight, not part of the crew. But if her assessment was correct, the pilots might not yet be fully aware of the severity of the situation. Should she remain silent and trust that the crew would handle whatever was happening? Or should she somehow make her expertise known? The decision was made for her when she heard a loud bang from the left side of the aircraft, followed immediately by a noticeable change in the engine sound. The vibration stopped suddenly, which was actually more concerning than when it had been present. It likely meant that the left engine had shut down or been shut down by the crew. Around her, passengers were beginning to notice that something was wrong. The aircraft was now flying on one engine. And while this was a manageable situation for a well-trained crew, it would require careful handling and immediate planning for an emergency landing. Sarah knew that the next few hours would test everyone aboard this aircraft. What had started as a routine flight home from vacation was about to become something much more serious. And despite being dressed as just another tourist, she might be the one person on board with the knowledge and experience to help ensure that all 320 souls aboard made it safely to the ground. The silence after the loud bang was broken by the captain's voice over the intercom. His tone was calm, but serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've experienced a technical issue with one of our engines. As a precaution, we've shut it down and are currently flying on one engine, which is perfectly safe. We'll be diverting to the nearest suitable airport. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Sarah felt her heart rate increase, not from fear but from professional recognition of the situation's complexity. Flying on one engine over the Arabian Sea meant they needed to reach land quickly. The nearest airports would be either back to Mumbai, which was about an hour behind them, or forward to airports in the Middle East. Around her, passengers were reacting with varying degrees of concern. Some seemed calm, trusting the captain's reassurance. Others were visibly nervous, gripping armrests and looking around anxiously. A few children started crying, sensing their parents' tension. Mr. Sharma turned to Sarah with worry in his eyes. "You're a pilot. Is this really safe?" Sarah chose her words carefully. Modern aircraft are designed to fly safely on one engine. The crew is trained for this exact situation. What she didn't say was that the success of such an emergency depended entirely on the crew's skill, the aircraft's condition, and various factors they couldn't yet assess. 20 minutes passed, and Sarah noticed subtle changes that concerned her. The aircraft was descending gradually, which was normal for a single-engine approach to a diversion airport. But she also detected a slight yaw to the left, suggesting possible hydraulic issues beyond just the engine failure. Then came an announcement that made her blood run cold. "We're experiencing some additional technical difficulties. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for a possible emergency landing." The words "additional technical difficulties" meant the situation had escalated beyond a simple engine shutdown. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities: hydraulic failure, electrical problems, or issues with the remaining engine. Any of these could turn a manageable emergency into a life-threatening crisis. The flight attendants sprang into action with impressive professionalism. They quickly demonstrated the brace position, checked that emergency exits were clear, and ensured passengers had their life vests accessible. But Sarah could see the strain in their faces. They knew this was serious. A young mother across the aisle was struggling to keep her two small children calm while putting on their life vests. Her hands were shaking, and the children were picking up on her fear. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and moved across the aisle to help. "Hi there," she said gently to the mother. "I'm Sarah. Can I help you with these life vests?" The woman nodded gratefully, tears in her eyes. "I'm Rita. I don't know how to. I'm so scared." Sarah knelt down and smiled at the children, a boy about 6 and a girl about 4. "Hey, you two. Want to see something cool? These yellow things are like superhero capes, but they help you float in water like a duck." As she helped fit the life vests properly, Sarah spoke calmly to Rita. "The crew is doing everything right. They're trained for situations like this, and they practice these procedures regularly." What Sarah was really doing was assessing the cabin situation while providing comfort. She noticed that some passengers were panicking, which could become dangerous if they needed to evacuate. Others seemed frozen with fear. A few were following the flight attendant's instructions precisely. As Sarah returned to her seat, she made a decision that would change everything. She approached the senior flight attendant, a woman in her 40s, who was clearly experienced but also clearly stressed. "Excuse me," Sarah said quietly. "I need to tell you something important." I'm Captain Sarah Mitchell, with British Airways. I fly Boeing 777 seconds internationally. If there's any way I can assist the flight crew, please let me know. The flight attendant's eyes widened. You're a pilot? A captain? Yes. 8 years experience. Current on wide-body aircraft. I know this might be irregular, but if the cockpit crew could use an extra set of trained eyes. The flight attendant didn't hesitate. Wait here. She immediately used her interphone to contact the cockpit. Sarah could hear her speaking rapidly, but couldn't make out the words over the engine noise and passenger chatter. 2 minutes later, the flight attendant returned. Captain Mitchell? The captain would like to speak with you immediately. Please, follow me. Sarah's heart pounded as she made her way toward the front of the aircraft. This was unprecedented in her experience. Pilots didn't just walk into other airlines' cockpits during emergencies. But these were extraordinary circumstances. The cockpit door opened, and she was greeted by Captain Rajesh Gupta, a man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. Captain Mitchell? Thank God. I've heard of you. You handled that emergency landing in Frankfurt 2 years ago. Sarah was surprised he knew about that incident. But there was no time for pleasantries. What's your situation, Captain? Captain Gupta's co-pilot, First Officer Priya Patel, looked up from a checklist. Left engine failed catastrophically about 30 minutes ago. We've also lost primary hydraulics and have degraded flight controls. We're heading for Muscat. But she didn't finish the sentence, but Sarah understood immediately. Muscat was still 2 hours away with degraded systems. The aircraft was becoming increasingly difficult to control, and they were over open ocean. May I look at your situation? Sarah asked. Captain Gupta nodded and stepped aside slightly. Sarah quickly scanned the instrument panel. Multiple warning lights were illuminated, and she could see the hydraulic pressure readings were dropping slowly but steadily. You've got about an hour before you lose most flight control authority, she assessed. Muscat might be too far. That's what we're afraid of, First Officer Patel said. We're running calculations now, but with these system failures. Sarah studied their navigation display. What about ditching procedures? Have you considered a water landing? Both pilots looked at her with surprise. Water landings were extremely dangerous and rarely successful, especially with a wide-body aircraft. The Arabian Sea is relatively calm today, Sarah continued, and we have ships in the area. It might be safer than trying to reach Muscat with failing systems. Captain Gupta shook his head. The company procedures don't recommend ditching unless absolutely necessary, and I've never done one with passengers. Sarah understood his reluctance. Water landings were the last resort, and the survival rate was poor. But sometimes, the last resort was the only option. Captain, I've studied every major water landing in aviation history. Hudson River, Ethiopian 961, others. There are techniques that can improve survival rates significantly. You've done water landing training? First Officer Patel asked. Extensive simulator work and theoretical study. It was part of my advanced certification program. Sarah was stretching the truth slightly, but she had indeed studied water landings more than most pilots. Captain Gupta was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing his options. The aircraft shuddered slightly as another hydraulic system showed signs of strain. Walk me through it, he said finally. What would a successful water landing require? Sarah took a deep breath. This was it. The moment when her knowledge and experience might save 320 lives or doom them all. First, we need to prepare the passengers properly. Water landings succeed or fail based on evacuation speed. Second, we need to configure the aircraft for the lowest possible impact speed. Third, we need to coordinate with rescue services to have ships positioned before we go down. How long do we have to decide? Captain Gupta asked. Sarah looked at the hydraulic readings again. Maybe 20 minutes before the decision point. After that, we won't have enough control authority to execute either option safely. The three pilots worked frantically over the next 15 minutes. Sarah helped calculate approach speeds and evacuation procedures, while Captain Gupta and First Officer Patel handled communications with air traffic control and their airline operations center. The decision came when the second hydraulic system began showing pressure loss. Captain Gupta looked at his two colleagues and said the words that would seal their fate. "We're going for a water landing. May God help us all." But first, they had to tell 320 terrified passengers that their aircraft was about to attempt one of the most dangerous maneuvers in aviation, and somehow, they had to give those people hope that they could survive what was coming next. Captain Gupta's announcement to the passengers was the most difficult of his 25-year career. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to multiple system failures, we will be making an emergency landing on water. This is a precautionary measure, and we are fully prepared for this procedure. Please listen carefully to your flight attendants for evacuation instructions." The cabin erupted in controlled chaos. Some passengers screamed, others prayed quietly, and many sat in stunned silence. But the flight attendants, trained for exactly this scenario, immediately took charge with remarkable composure. Sarah had insisted on remaining in the cockpit to assist with the approach, but she also wanted to help prepare the cabin. "Captain, I'd like to brief the passengers on water landing procedures. They need to understand what's going to happen." Captain Gupta nodded. "First Officer Patel will handle the approach setup. You take the PA system." Sarah picked up the intercom microphone, her hands surprisingly steady. She had spoken to passengers thousands of times during normal flights, but never under these circumstances. "This is Captain Sarah Mitchell. I'm a British Airways pilot who happened to be traveling as a passenger today. I'm now assisting your crew with our emergency procedures." Her calm, authoritative voice cut through the panic in the cabin. "I want you to know that water landings, while uncommon, can be successful when done properly. We have excellent weather conditions, calm seas, and rescue ships are already being positioned in our landing area. But I need everyone to follow instructions exactly." She continued with specific instructions that most passengers had never heard before. How to position themselves for water impact, what to do immediately after touchdown, how to locate and use the emergency slides that would become life rafts. Most importantly, Sarah emphasized, do not inflate your life vest until you are outside the aircraft. An inflated vest can trap you inside if the cabin floods. In the cockpit, Captain Gupta and First Officer Patel were executing the most challenging approach of their careers. With limited hydraulic power, the aircraft's controls were heavy and unresponsive. Every input required significant physical effort and careful timing. Sarah returned to assist with the approach phase. "We need to aim for the smoothest possible touchdown," she advised. "Speed is critical. Too fast, and we'll skip and break apart. Too slow, and we'll stall and nose in." The target speed for their aircraft weight and configuration was 130 knots. Significantly slower than a normal landing, but still fast enough to maintain control. They would have only one chance to get it right. Through the cockpit windows, they could see the vast expanse of the Arabian Sea stretching to the horizon. The water was indeed remarkably calm, with swells of only 2 to 3 feet. In the distance, they could see 3 ships converging on their planned touchdown point. "Rescue coordination is working perfectly," First Officer Patel reported. "We have an Indian Navy vessel, a commercial cargo ship, and a fishing boat, all within 5 miles of our landing zone." Sarah was monitoring the aircraft's systems and energy management. "We're coming in too high. We need to increase our descent rate, or we'll overshoot the rescue zone." Captain Gupta pushed the nose down slightly, feeling the aircraft respond sluggishly to his inputs. "Hydraulics are almost gone. This is going to be close." At 1,000 feet above the water, Sarah made her final announcement to the passengers. "We are 2 minutes from touchdown. Assume the brace position now and hold it until we come to a complete stop. Remember, do not inflate your life vest until you're outside the aircraft." The cabin was eerily quiet, except for the prayers being whispered in multiple languages and the sound of the flight attendants giving final instructions. At 500 feet, Captain Gupta began the most critical phase. He needed to level the aircraft and maintain exactly the right speed and attitude for water contact. Too steep, and the nose would dig in, causing the aircraft to cartwheel. Too shallow, and they would skip across the surface, potentially breaking apart. Airspeed 135 knots, First Officer Patel called out. Too fast, Sarah said. We need 130. Captain Gupta reduced power on the remaining engine, feeling the aircraft settle slightly. The water was rushing up toward them now, and he could see individual waves. Speed 132 knots. Close enough, Sarah said. Hold this attitude. The moment of impact came with a tremendous roar and spray of water. The aircraft hit the surface with its belly, skipped once, then settled into the water with a jarring deceleration that threw everyone forward against their restraints. For a moment, there was complete silence, except for the sound of water against the fuselage. Then Captain Gupta's voice. Evacuation! Evacuation! Evacuate now! The flight attendants had already sprung into action, opening emergency exits and deploying the slide rafts. Sarah was amazed at their efficiency under pressure. Within seconds, the first passengers were sliding down the emergency chutes into the life rafts. But the aircraft was settling into the water faster than expected. The nose was already partially submerged, and water was beginning to enter the cabin through small gaps around the doors. Sarah found herself moving through the cabin, helping elderly passengers and children reach the exits. The water was knee-deep in some areas and rising steadily. Mr. Sharma, her seatmate from earlier, was struggling to help his wife toward an exit. This way, Sarah called, guiding them toward the nearest emergency slide. The evacuation was proceeding remarkably well considering the circumstances. Passengers were helping each other, following instructions, and moving toward the exits in an orderly fashion. The months of training that the flight attendants had undergone was paying off in lives saved. Within 8 minutes of touchdown, nearly all passengers were in life rafts or in the water wearing life vests. The aircraft was settling lower, with water now reaching the overhead compartments in the forward section. Sarah was among the last to leave, helping a flight attendant ensure no one was left behind. As she slid down the emergency chute into the life raft, she could see the rescue ships approaching rapidly. The first ship to reach them was the Indian Navy vessel INS Chennai. Their rescue boats were in the water within minutes, pulling passengers from life rafts and treating the injured. The coordination was flawless, as if they had practiced this exact scenario. Captain Gupta and First Officer Patel were the last to leave the aircraft, following maritime tradition. As they climbed into a rescue boat, the aircraft's nose finally disappeared beneath the surface, leaving only the tail section visible above water. In the life raft, Sarah found herself next to Rita and her 2 children, the young family she had helped earlier. The children were remarkably calm, treating their yellow life vests like the superhero capes she had described. "Are we safe now?" the little girl asked. "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah replied. "We're safe." Mr. Sharma appeared in a nearby rescue boat, waving when he saw Sarah. "Captain," he called out, "you saved us all." But Sarah knew the truth was more complex. The successful outcome was the result of many people doing their jobs exceptionally well under extreme pressure. Captain Gupta and First Officer Patel had executed a nearly impossible maneuver. The flight attendants had managed a perfect evacuation. The passengers had followed instructions despite their terror. The rescue services had responded with incredible efficiency. 2 hours later, all 320 souls aboard Flight AI 482 were safely aboard the rescue ships. 17 passengers required medical treatment for minor injuries, but there were no fatalities. It was being called a miracle of modern aviation. As Sarah stood on the deck of INS Chennai, still wearing her tourist clothes and wrapped in a navy blanket, she watched the last piece of the aircraft disappear beneath the waves. Her vacation was definitely over, but 320 people were going home to their families. Captain Gupta approached her as journalists on the rescue ship began taking photos. Captain Mitchell, I don't know how to thank you. Your knowledge of water landing procedures made the difference between success and catastrophe. Sarah shook her head. You and your crew made the difference. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But she knew that wasn't entirely true. Her years of training, her study of aviation accidents, her decision to reveal her identity and offer help, all of these factors had contributed to saving lives. Later, as she gave statements to accident investigators and aviation authorities, Sarah reflected on the strange turn her vacation had taken. She had boarded the flight as just another tourist, looking forward to returning home with memories of India's incredible culture and landscapes. Instead, she was returning as part of one of the most successful emergency water landings in aviation history. The media would later call her the tourist hero pilot, and her story would be studied in flight training programs around the world. But for Sarah, the most important outcome was simple. When the final count was done, all 320 passengers and crew members were alive and safe. Mr. Sharma would see his grandchildren in London. Rita's children would grow up and tell their own children about the day they survived a plane crash. Captain Gupta and First Officer Patel would continue flying, their skills proven under the ultimate test. As the rescue ship headed toward port in Muscat, Sarah pulled her phone from her waterproof pocket and called her chief pilot at British Airways. She had quite a story to tell, and somehow she suspected her next vacation request might be approved without question. The sun was setting over the Arabian Sea, painting the sky in brilliant colors that reminded her why she had fallen in love with flying in the first place. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin when you least expect them, disguised as ordinary moments that change everything.